Yeah, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Alrighty. So yay, welcome to the Dance of Anger discussion, virtual book club. I'm super excited for this first round just because I really enjoyed the book. I like looked forward to my 12-15 pages a day. I ended up reading like 20 to 25 instead because I was like, no, I gotta know. And I like that it was broken down into like it kind of felt like every chapter was about 20 pages, except for like chapter 7 and chapter 8. It was a little more. So yeah, I like that. Anyways, so welcome, Eliza. And we'll just let the stragglers come on in when they do. But anyway, I want to start with, how about you? What was like what did you like most about it?
I muted myself. Okay. So I really liked I just liked that it was geared specifically towards women, because I've read, I don't know if you've read like Anatomy of Peace and Leadership and Self-Deception, but they're kind of within like the relationship conflict resolution aspect as well, but they're just for like relationships in general. And I really liked how the Dance of Anger addressed like women specifically, and specifically how like societal expectations and conditioning and like family roles and everything that that women have been forced into just by being a woman contribute to the way we have learned how to handle our anger. And I just thought it was a really cool and enlightening perspective. Just kind of like, oh yeah, like that would make sense as to why that happens, because like of the way society is,
Yeah, like, it's designed that way, right? Hi, Angie. Welcome. It is, and it's a generational pass down. It's like, here, let's just keep passing this non-functioning way of doing things down to the next generation. What did you say, Ange? My mom called me. We had a family meeting. I'll be off the call soon. Oh, okay. All right, sounds good. Okay. Thanks for letting us know. So, Ange, are you here right now then to discuss, or you're on the phone? I wasn't clear on that. Anyway, so let's introduce ourselves, and then yay, you are here. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. We had a family of origin family meeting.
Oh.
And she called me to be like, I just want to apologize about anyways.
Oh, okay. Well, perfect timing though. I mean, you read the book and you were probably.
I told her that I finished it today, and I was like, oh, during the family meeting, I was like, oh, this is what's going on.
Yeah. And did you find yourself like, I know I'm kind of jumping ahead. Hi, Jana. Did you find yourself identifying your old role and trying to like not play into the old role, or did you catch yourself doing it?
This whole family meeting came about partly because of a conversation my dad and I had a couple of weeks ago, which I was like, oh, there's triangulation happening. Because my dad was like, well, I talked with your brother and I talked with your sister and they are, and I was like, and I was kind of being blamed for stuff. And so anyways, and at that point in time, I was like, very like, oh, I'm totally showing up in my adult self. This is awesome. I've healed so much.
Yeah.
And then a couple days later, I talked with my parents and said, here's what I noticed here. Like, I'm wondering if we can talk, because I noticed triangulation, and my mom was actually like, I noticed that too. I'm glad you brought that up. And like, so they're definitely wanting to heal, but it's like a process,
Yeah.
But it was interesting because during the family meeting, that's why my mom ended up calling. But then the whole time I'm like, she's trying to triangulate. How do I stop this? No. My brother-in-law, there was one point in time where I was saying something in the middle of the meeting, and my brother-in-law completely cut me off. And he was like, we're not talking about that. And I went into disengaging mode. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting, because I have the reputation of being the pursuer in the family, and I have the reputation of being the over functioner. But actually, with my sister, I'm not. And
Yeah.
he treated me exactly how my sister
Uh,
usually would treat me. And so it was very like, I was like, oh, that whole half-hour meeting, I was very much in my adult self until that moment. And then I felt like I was about 6 years old, and so it was very interesting.
That's a
Seeing the
cool,
pattern.
yeah, awareness for sure. And what a gift
Yeah.
it is that you had that this meeting pop up and you could apply what you've learned.
Yeah.
Your
Yeah.
awareness, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, thanks for hopping on. And Jana, hi, welcome, welcome. And I don't think, well, I'll let you introduce yourself. Just I don't think you read the book, right? You just came to join the discussion, which I love. So I don't know let me open up my chat just in case you're typing. Okay, so we're gonna start with just share a story of when your anger wasn't helpful. And I'll have you go first, Eliza.
Okay, just one.
The most recent. Let's go with that, right? Like,
I think. Okay. When my anger was not helpful. I mean, I'll just go to like just what I can think of is like, my early marriage days when I was figuring out how to navigate a lot of stuff. My like I guess just, something little would trigger my anger, and then I would just kind of ignore it until I just kind of would explode out at my husband. And it would be
nice
like,
lady.
I know, yeah. It would be like, like something like it would be like 1 a.m. and I would wake up and he would still be up playing video games, and I would just like explode at him, and we'd just start like this huge argument in the middle of the night. So that happened multiple times in our early marriage and was definitely not helpful
Yeah.
for our marriage, for anything at all.
And I know you've posted in the group, like he still does his gaming. So what are you now doing instead? That's basically like, because the book has been bringing your awareness to like, nope, I'm not functioning that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an issue, and it's something that like, we've talked about and we've addressed many times, and we're kind of at a point where it's like, like, he'll tell me, okay, I want to play my game now, and then I'll say, okay, and that's his time, and I'll go do something else. Like I'll go take a bath, or I'll go read a book, or I'll go in the bedroom and watch one of my shows, or whatever, and just have kind of established like, that that's his time to do that, and I don't have to, because like video games were just like such, like my parents were not into video games, and so there's a lot of like rhetoric around video games that I think makes me more judgmental and more triggered by it and stuff. So I just kind of gone to the just kind of distance myself, just kind of say, okay, he's gonna do what he's gonna do, and we have better boundaries around it, where it's like, okay, he's gonna use this time. We've been a little bit better about saying like, okay, like these are the times that we want to have together, because I think a big thing would be like, oh, like I want to spend time with you, and you're playing your game when I want to be engaged with you and stuff. And so now we're just kind of more open about it. I'm still working through a lot of stuff with it.
Yeah,
but
I think that's the point though, right? That's the final takeaway, and the final chapter was like, it's a work in progress, continuous, right? Like literally, so I'll share mine. the reason I got introduced to this book by Shelley Howells was at the retreat last month and in October. And she was like, yeah, you definitely could be served by the Dance of Anger. And I was like, okay, I'll read it. And it was because I was like, just a few days before the retreat, I had built up so much of that anger, like you were talking about, that I exploded and I like broke some of my crystals. Like I got destructive, and I'm like, I'm not, this isn't me. Like, I mean, it's a part of me. And it's also not who I want to be, if that makes sense. And I've worked really hard in my journey to not like lose that control, right? To like be able to maintain my energy and my frequency and my mind. And anyway, I was going through all this shame about it. And she was like, read the Dance of Anger. And like, even just the first chapter, it was like, oh, it's either nice lady or bitch category, right? Or like, over functioning was a huge awareness for me. I was like, oh shit, I overfunction. Like, of course he's not going to step up in X, Y, and Z department because I'm covering it. I'm like, and step away. And so just last night, we went out on a date and we sat and talked for like an hour and a half at the dinner table. And then we went outside and there was dancing. And I really wanted to dance because I was like, I don't want to go on a date and just talk. Like, we could have just stayed home for that, So I was like, I wanted to go out and dance. And he was like, oh yeah, no, I'm not up for that. And I was like, I was so miffed, you guys. Like, I was so ticked off. And I was like, I don't even want to be here anymore. Like, and I basically threw a little bit, I emotionally distanced, which I recognized I did, because I was like, oh, well, fine, F you too then. Like, what's the point of being on a date if you're not even going to try? So then we leave and he's like, are you okay? What's wrong? And I was like, no, I'm not okay. I'm upset that I wanted to have fun with you and you were just like not available for it. And he goes, well, that's where I was at. I was honoring me and I didn't want to dishonor me to make you happy. And I was like, well, screw you too then. Like, I was so mad. I was like, do you know how many times I make sure you're happy, like, and I enjoy it, but it's like, I don't know. I went through this thing and then we didn't talk for the rest of the night. Then I woke up in the morning and I was like, oh, I like emotionally distanced and I totally like didn't allow him to honor himself. Even if that meant not doing, like, wanting to experience the value that I wanted. So I apologized to him and I said, hey, I recognize that I was trying to experience something with you. You were available for it. And instead of just like allowing that to be, I got upset and made you pay for it with silence, And so I was like, if I want to have fun like that, I'll create other opportunities if it's not with you. Like, I realize you're not responsible for my fun and my play. I would love to be able to do that with you if you're available, but if not, I'll figure it out elsewhere. So that was a breakthrough, even though I still had like kind of like the relapse, but it was just still pretty self-aware. So anyway, hey, Ange, your turn.
Yeah. By the way, I love that because I even tell my clients, like, hey, healing, you have to first, like, the first step of it is noticing it after the fact. It's still a progress step. You know what I mean? I don't know. Nothing actually super recent, which was actually kind of nice reading the book, realizing, like, because I mean, just to share, I mean, years ago when I had hit the point where I had been like with my ex, I'm starting to notice old patterns, blah, blah, blah. And like wanting to go to counseling, him being like, no. And then having a date where it was like, I'm going, whether you are or not, so we went. And then that was one of the first things the counselor told me was, I said, I'm just tired of being angry. I'm angry all the time and I'm tired of being angry. And she said, I'm just going to let you know, when I meet an angry person, my first thought is, oh, I've just met someone who has no boundaries, which, basically like overfunctioner or underfunctioner, so I was very much like that in the marriage because I had so many scripts. Oh, sorry, there's Miles. Like she was talking about it. Anyway, the way she talked about it was interesting. It was more seemed like cognitive process of like find out about your family history. Like just, it was very similar to what I've gone through, but like different too. So my counselor gave me a lot of the same type of information that's in this book, and so did a lot of the energy healing, like through Carol Tuttle. But I would, example, there were many times my ex would come home like way later than he had said he would, or, oh, here's a better one, call in the middle of the day when I was taking care of the kids and be like, what are you doing? And I would say, I'm feeding Matthew. Why? Well, it's only going to take 2 minutes. I need you to do da 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 da. And I'd be like, I'm in the middle of stuff. And then instead of just setting a boundary, I would say, you always do this. You did it. I mean, it was very you focused, and not like, oh, wait, I could have said, I already told you this doesn't work when I'm taking care of the kids. I will cut checks for your business on Tuesdays and on Thursdays. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. Click, and I was over functioning because then I would like do what he wanted me to do. So then he didn't have to learn how to be organized. Does that make sense? Yeah. So anyways.
Yeah, I had to share another example just literally from today. Dustin took our 13-year-old's phone because he got her a new phone, but she wanted to keep her old phone. And she was like losing it to like mock level of anger that anybody pretty much, like, it was very intense. And I caught myself being like, I am frozen in freeze of like the cortisol release. I was like, I cannot do anything. I don't know what to do, because if I say anything to like support her, then I'm going to be emotionally rescuing. So I was like in this cognitive dissonance of like, what do I actually do? Like, because I felt like I understood his point. He wanted her to use the new phone and she was refusing to use it. But the way he was going about it it felt like psychological warfare. He's like, I'm going to take a hammer and smash your phone until you accept this one. I'm not giving your phone back. And he just kept going. And even though she's like having a complete emotional panic attack meltdown. And so I was like, okay, what do I do here? Because I'm just like, okay, I don't want to emotionally rescue. I don't want to do the triangle. I'm like overthinking all the things, right? So I was like, fuck it. I'm going to just say to both of them, like, I get where you're coming from. So I did the mediator instead. But the level that Exana was at, you guys, was so extreme that like, I couldn't just leave it to nothing. Like,
well, okay, so I have to say, like, because this makes me think of the example in the book that she uses with Billy and the dad. And like that, like the mom would come in and take Billy's side or tell the dad that, like basically the exact situation you were dealing with. And she said, the mom said, basically, okay, I can feel my own anxiety rise, yet I know that this is something that's appropriate for you to work out with Billy. So if you see me leave, that's why, because I'm dealing with, I'll just, take ownership of my stuff, let you figure it out. And my thought and my note in the book was, she does have a little caveat, like, if you do suspect it could reach a point where it would have physical harm, like, obviously step in and tell your spouse that you would do that.
See, and I feel
my
like
note was, what about
emotional?
That's what I was saying. What about emotional abuse? What about verbal and emotional? Because that's more, and that's my only, I know you haven't gotten to this point yet, so maybe my only critique of the book is that there were no caveats about, this is a point where it's not okay, where their counter moves are not okay.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But she does say there will be counter moves expected and they will escalate the counter moves, but there was nothing in there that was like, and by the way, when it gets to this point, that's a sign that they're not choosing into healing and it's time to step away. I feel like if I would have gotten my hands on this book in the past, it could have even prolonged the situation I was in even longer, because I would have been like, I must still be in the dance. It's my fault. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think with today's situation, like, I felt like I just maintained as much as I could, but I did say to Dustin, I was like, is there any way we can go talk privately, so that way to communicate for understanding, so that way I can see where you're coming from. because like I really didn't get it. I was like, what the fuck is happening, people? And then Ixana's like losing it. And so I just held her to bring down her anxiety because it was so out of control. And I did feel like it was a layer of like, it had that tone of emotional abuse. And so this went on pretty much all day, you guys. Like, I mean, it was so intense. And then finally, he went to leave with the phone and I went out and I was like, okay, can we have the conversation now? Like, what's going on? I'd like to understand. And he's like, well, I'm just sick and tired of their entitlement. She got a brand new phone and she's not even grateful for it. And I was like, okay, so he's missing gratitude. He's, I get that. And I was like, I see and hear what you're saying, and I agree with you. Like, I don't understand her position either. She got a new phone and she's complaining about it. Like, what? You want your old phone that's got a cracked screen, like, anyway. And so I did tell him, though, I was like, it kind of feels like what the government is doing, like, do it my way or else. And do we really want to be raising the next generation, our kids, where they're forced or coerced to like comply? And that's kind of when he shifted, because he was like, but he didn't shift nicely. He was pissed off. He's like, fine, screw it, I won't even care about this family. And then he stormed off and he gave her phone back. But this was like after 7 hours of just them going at it, and I'm just like, I'm just gonna not involve myself. And then so I agree with you. I feel like, what do we do? I feel, it's like I really love the I statement empowerment thing, where it's like, I feel this is my missing value. And, this is what I feel like I can do. So anyway, if you guys have ideas, that'd be cool. All right, let's go to question 1. What are the typical ways that you manage anger? So, for example, venting, distancing, blaming, that haven't really been working for you. We kind of touched on it a little bit, but just make it, we don't have to tell a story, just kind of say which word really resonates with you. Are you like a distancer, a venter, a blamer?
For me, it really depends on the person, and she gets at that at the end. I do find that I vent, like, historically, I'm a venter and seek to triangulate that way. Does that make sense? Like,
for sure.
That I try to, like, I'll call my best friend, or I would call my mom or something and be like, I can't believe, like, he's being such an asshole, versus sitting in my emotions. So and actually I don't even know if I saw it as triangulation more. I realized about a half a year ago, I'm like, oh, that's me trying to dump my emotions on other people because they're too big for me. You know what I mean?
And just to explain to Jana the triangulation part that Angie's referring to, it's just where, we have the 3 people. It's kind of like victim, villain, hero. And then the victim and the hero kind of team up versus the villain. But the 2 people, let's say it's a parental unit focusing on a child, they're not actually having to work on their crap because they're distracted with, the problem child. So that's kind of the triangle that we're talking about, or, with a friend or whatever. So, How about you, Liza?
So for me, I definitely have a huge history of being the pursuer. But I would say that recently, like, kind of like a pendulum, like I was on the pursuer end, and then I was just like, I'm exhausted, I can't be the pursuer anymore, way before I read this book. But just like over the summer, there was just so much stress in our relationship, and I was like, you know what, I'm done. And I kind of swung to the like disengaging part. And so just like, when stuff bothers me, I might mention to my husband, like, hey, at some point I want to talk about this. And then it literally like never gets addressed. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. It's like, I'm trying not to label it. Like, no, I'm just kind of like, okay, this is where we're at. I've definitely like been letting a lot of things just like go, or just like, whatever. Just because, I just don't have the energy to keep butting heads about it all the time, you know?
Yeah.
And it's something that like I definitely, especially like when we're in front of our son, like I'm not gonna, you know, I'm not gonna start an argument because I don't want, you know, my son to be in the middle of, you know, one of our explosive arguments. So it's just like, you know, when we do have time together, it's like I don't want to spend it hashing out all our crap, but I know there's stuff that needs to be addressed. So I'm like,
one thing that I've noticed is because and we started it the end of October, so the same time that I started reading this book, is having a like couples discussion time set. No matter what, every day it's at this time for about an hour, usually 45 minutes to an hour. And so there was an instance where something came up with one of the kids and he came to me about it, you know, because I'm the overfunctioner or the emotional rescuer. And so he was like, here, I'm having a struggle here. And I was like, oh, and actually the irony is I was reading the book and it was during my book reading time. And I was like, I looked up at him and I said, you know, I really want to finish reading my book. That's what my time is set aside for at this time. And he got a little frustrated because he was like, no, I got to handle it now. And I was like, he goes, no, I'm bringing this to you because, you know, I've got this anger. And I was like, I understand. And I know you're capable of like taking care of your anger, but I am available to have a discussion about it during our discussion time tomorrow at 1:45. And then no matter what, and it was cool because he shut it down. He didn't pursue it. It stopped. We put a pin. I literally said, can we put a pin in it? And then the next day I was my word and we talked about it in that discussion. And that was really effective. So
yeah, I've been trying, you know, I'll be like, hey, like I'm, you know, having some issues with this. I'd like to talk about it, you know, because when we're both in a good space for it.
Yeah.
And I think I need to, you know, when I approach him like that, say like, let's set a time to talk about this instead of just saying, oh, can we talk about it sometime? Say
it's
like
a commitment thing or
that's I was gonna say, if you're interested at all, I've got a lot of information on that because, you know, spent a lot of time and money at a counselor. No, like healthy communication model and how to even have the discussions, how to even have like how to bring up stuff and then have the discussion, because a lot of times too, when people get uncomfortable, then the blame shift or the deflecting, and how to handle that, how to even just say, okay, let's have a parking lot. Have you guys heard of that? Having a parking lot,
similar to like put a pin in it.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, because it's actually a list that you keep then. So we used it in business meetings when I worked for Boston Scientific. So if anything comes up that isn't the topic that the person who brought up the conversation, if it's not related to that, the person who brings it up says, you know what, that is a very valid concern that you have. When we are done discussing this, let's set up a time to talk about that. And you keep a running list of other topics that get flushed out. Does that make sense?
Yeah. That's right.
Because otherwise, like, nothing gets resolved. Because that's the pattern we would fall into. Either like the time was never set aside or nothing got resolved because like the main topic would come up and like 10 offshoots.
The red herrings. Yeah, I call them the red herring.
Yeah. So, but the number one thing she said was the cardinal rule is set aside a formal time, choose a time when neither of you have a time crunch, like where you really can focus on it.
Yeah.
And not be like, I'm running out the door. Why are you you know, and she's like, even if you like set aside a half an hour, it ends up taking more, like you hit the pause button then, but you at least know entering the conversation.
Yeah.
Kind of like what you were saying, Sabrina. So
yeah. What were you gonna say, Lisa?
I was just gonna say, you know, that makes a lot of sense because there was some stuff that happened over the summer and kind of at the culmination of it. You know, there was this, like, my husband just had this massive emotional blowout, and I was kind of like, dude, you gotta deal with your shit, like this is ridiculous kind of thing. And we, after it had happened, I was like, okay, we need to talk about this. And so we were sitting down and talking about it. And I was like, okay, like, when you were like doing this is how I felt. And then he would bring up, well, but you've done this and this and this to me before. And it's like, yeah, and we've addressed it in the past, and that's not what we're talking about right now. So, but I didn't handle it like that. I just, and so I think I like that idea of, just setting the boundary, being like, yeah, that happened. If you want to address it further, let's talk about it another time. Right now, we're talking about this.
I love that. Yeah.
I like
Yeah,
that a lot.
Yeah. Also, do you guys want a tip? This is a Carol Tuttle tip
Sure.
for when you said, yeah, for handling situations like, because I have found it super helpful. She said, anytime that someone you're talking to is triggered, or yourself, obviously, it's a sign of a wounded inner child wanting to take over. So she said that she literally, like, you ahead of time when people are calm, and my counselor had said this too, like, define what's respectful communication. Like, this is how we're going to define respectful communication. And then when the communication is no longer respectful, just say, I will continue this conversation when it can be respectful. But here's the like tip. Literally then visualize meeting with their wounded inner child and saying, oh, hello. Like, so I'll use my ex-husband's name. Hi, little Pat. I can tell you're really scared and hurt right now. I'm adult Angie and I married adult Pat. And although I love you, adult Pat is who can help you. And then sending them to their adult self in love. She's like, it helps like spiritually and energetically send all of that crap back to them. So anyways.
Okay. So it was, hold on, repeat. That was, hi, little Pat. And then what? I'm adult.
Like you basically just sit and have a conversation. Like, imagine having a conversation with them where you basically are just like, oh, hi, little Pat. Like, you seem hurt or you seem scared. It's understandable that you are, but I want to let you know I married adult Pat. So adult Pat can help you, not me. Like, I'm not your mom. And then send him, like, I'm not the one responsible for you. And though I love you, I'm sending you to the person who's responsible for you. And I have to admit, I did that once. It was very hard for me because I knew that adult Pat wasn't capable of, I felt like I was sending little Pat to the wolves. No. Jana, you don't actually say that to them.
No,
you visualize it. It's a meditation. Yes, that would be very condescending. No, it's a meditation. Because yeah, no, and part of the reason she says that is because I was triggered tonight at one point in that family meeting. Yeah. And I do intend, I was like, oh, that was little Angie showing up. So I'll go journal with little Angie tomorrow morning or later tonight when it feels right. I already let the emotion come out, but to actually flush it out. And I'll visualize with little Angie. So it's doing that same thing I would do with my inner child.
Yeah.
But then sending him to his adult self so that I'm not codependent in that place.
But I think,
does that make sense?
I think the thing that we could say is I feel, I'm feeling frustrated, and my responsibility in this is, it looks like this for me, rather than the blaming thing. Ooh,
yeah, well, and it definitely becomes, she said, okay. No, it becomes where, and both Carol and my counselor have said this. When the second someone's triggered, the conversation should pause. So that you both have an opportunity to process. And my counselor was big on, and remember, the pause is not to sit on, well, they're not listening, they, the pause is to say, I feel, process how I'm feeling, and remember the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is that we come together and we are able to do blah, blah, blah. And we can only do that if I own my shit and he owns his shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I still
love,
have to work on.
well, and that's how the book started, is anger, any emotion really is a signal to stop or pause and go inward, not pause and go outward and try and get the other person to fix the problem you're having, right?
Side note with that, because Eliza, you brought up, then the conversation never happens. When we would pause, the conversation would never like result. Like if Pat were like, I'm out of here. First off, she's like, you never pause, and you're not supposed to pause rudely. It's not just, it's more like I'm triggered right now. I'd like to hit the pause button to process. And it might be, I'm triggered, I'm pausing, but it's more like ownership versus stonewalling. And then saying, committing that we will always check back within like an hour or two to just see, are you ready yet? Let's schedule a time to finish it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because otherwise it like never gets resolved.
Yeah, I like that a lot. My husband, bless his heart, has so much inner child crap. Like he was in foster care and had emotionally abusive parents that adopted him, and it's just a mess. And so, whenever I enter a conversation that's like, hey, your behavior is problematic, he goes into this like, she's gonna leave me, fight or flight thing. And yeah, and so it's just hard to navigate, but I like that a lot. Just, even like just for him just being like, hey, I can tell that what I said just triggered you right now. Let's take a break. I'll check back in with you in like a half hour and see where you're at, or something like that. I think that'll be really helpful.
Yeah. I agree. I'm excited for you to, maybe implement the time thing. And even I'm going to be implementing the visualization of the inner child. I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, it helps a lot. It helps me a lot to have more compassion.
Yeah.
For him in the moments when I'm like, you're being such a dick. Then at times, excuse my language, sorry. Then at times I can be like, oh, hi 5-year-old Pat, how are you doing today?
Right. Oh, okay.
Like
Exactly.
Somebody didn't get hugged by his parents. Do you need to sit on someone's lap?
Can I just hold you? Yeah, actually.
Well, side note, my ex did not grow up in foster care, but so when he was born, his parents had a 5-year-old, a 13-month-old with Down syndrome, and he's a twin.
Oh.
So I'm like, it totally makes sense. Like your parents physically could not hold you enough or give you there wasn't enough of them to give him the physical need. And then his brother had his days and nights switched. So of the twins, his brother got a lot more attention. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm like, it's not your fault, but it happened.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. We're going to move forward with the next question. Do you feel this book was helpful personally and professionally? Why or why not? Who wants to go first?
Super helpful. Like, just, it's one of those books that I think I'm gonna have to read it like many more times, because I kind of, to get it done in the amount of time, I kind of just rushed, just sped read it or listened to it. And I'm gonna have to go back through it and stuff, but just, I think like this first time, it just like, it brought so much awareness. It was like, oh, like that's where, that's what I was doing when we were first married, and this is what I'm doing now. And oh my gosh, there is so much triangulation between like me and my mom and my siblings right now. And like, just, I think creating awareness around all the dynamics in my family has been really, really good.
Yeah, it has been a really great tool to create that. Oh, there's the triangle. This is where I play that role. So yeah, I'll share mine. So personally, yeah, obviously with like my kids, my husband, those are the biggest ones. And then the part where it was like, if you don't have your like nuclear family unit or whatever healed, then you're just going to have these issues. And it was like, I'm just not subscribing to that, because I have spent a lot of years to the point where it was actually harming me. It was the overfunctioning to show up and be in the relationship with a very toxic woman that at this point, I love her. I like wish her nothing but the best, but I'm unable to welcome her into my field or space or any sort of semblance of like, here, let me try and heal this to this version of reality. It's like, this is healed. I love you and I release you. And there's no more expectations. Like, you are just as you are, and I am as I am. And it's all good enough. So that was the only thing that I was like, seriously, though, I can't help what happened with my mom.
It's
Like, she is who
it's
she is.
back to the caveat of abuse, I feel
Right.
like. Because I
Yeah.
agree with you on that. Like, I have not my story, but I have some close friends, and you included, like, who have a very similar story to you. There was like legitimate hardcore abuse happening, and the family still won't acknowledge it.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
would be abusive to try to have a relationship. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, and
So I agree with
I
you.
agree as well. Because my husband's adoptive parents, like they are, I've never met them. Like they basically, after my husband was like, I'm sick of being treated like this, I'm out, like they cut off, everything. And we've tried multiple times to be like, hey, we do want a relationship with you guys, and it's just been nothing. And so it's like,
Yeah.
we're not gonna spend all our energy trying to, put into this relationship, like it's, I agree. Like I do wish that there was, a definition of like you know, when it reaches this point.
Well,
But
for me, it was, moving across the planet, mom flipping script back into the very toxic version of herself, and then watching my children having fallen in love with her, and then going through the same abuse that I had received my entire life. And now my children are victims of, like, I don't like using victim, but it was sad. It was devastating. Like, they had fallen in love with this version of my mom that is a part of her, but mostly who she is very unhealthy. And so the ramifications were, literally, I think it was like a week ago, Exana was crying about like, why couldn't Nan love us? And I'm like, I literally have cried, and I just passed down a generational thing. And I was like, that's when you say, you know what, I'm just no longer willing to play the generational game, and I love you and I release you and I wish you farewell.
Well, she basically seemed to say you can only, the impression I got was her take is you can only break family patterns by being aware and in touch with those stories. But I feel like, for lack of better vocabulary on it, I feel like she has a lot of really, really good information, but it's all 3D. And there's a 5D way to heal the family.
Yeah.
Because you can do ancestral healing at a spirit level and achieve all of that and more.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? In terms of breaking family patterns, was kind of the impression I got. I don't know.
Well, and I think for me, with my mom specifically, I was just like, okay, soul contract complete. Like, and I think that's the difference. It's like, if you're still carrying the malice and the wounding, like, it's not that my inner child doesn't have moments of sadness. It's just, and I'm not numbing it out. I know that. I'm just like, oh, okay, soul contract complete. Like, my higher self just knows. And that's okay. Like, it's the surrender aspect. So I don't fully subscribe to the fact of like, heal your previous, your nuclear family relationships to like, then you'll be arrived at healed. It's like, you can only do so much.
And I guess in a way, the argument, not to her definition necessarily, but I guess I would make the argument like that, like you said, soul contract complete, like it is healed because maybe what you needed to learn was to that boldly stand up for yourself.
Yeah, I've never
that confident. You know what I mean?
Always still chasing after my mom for all of the 10 years that she like stopped. She cut me off for like 10 years. I would email her, I'd send her a birthday, like I was continuously pursuing, and now I'm like, nope, like I'm no longer doing that because that's not healthy for me. So,
no, and I found that, like, back to the question, like I found it really helpful in that, to be like, all of this information I've heard and learned, but she used just different enough language at times where it hit differently. Or, like I'm a big believer, like whether energy healing, psychology, religions, like a lot of things are explaining the same thing, but
Yep.
kind of like this, and then this, and then this. And so you get a more and more complete picture. Does
Yeah.
that make sense? And so I'm like, oh, like every one of these concepts I've gone through, but reading it made a lot of what my counselor had told me make a lot more sense even. Like,
Yeah.
oh, that's the why. That's why she was
That
telling me
layer.
to do
Yeah. To a
that. Or,
deep
yeah.
extent. Yeah.
Yeah. But I also, it was interesting to read it and think, okay, if she had told me to read this 6 years ago, would I actually have gotten value out of it? And I almost feel like I wouldn't have been, I was so hurt and so wounded. I don't think I could have applied it yet.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does take a high level of accountability and self-awareness for sure.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it would have helped, but like, I think it would have been a book that I would have, same thing with the book Codependent No More. I read that book. She recommended that right away, that and Boundaries. And I reread Codependent No More like 4 years later. And I was like, is this the same book? Like I was, you know what I mean? And I think that's how this book would be if I had read it 6 years ago.
I want to share how it helped me professionally, because what I was craving with my husband was stability. Like, I'm like, I want financial stability with you. I want mental and emotional stability. That word just kept showing up. And it brought me back to, okay, Sabrina, like, sweetheart, what do you get to do to create stability? What do you get to do to create stability within your business? And then I basically like was able to plan out my month of these are the posts, these are the group situation, like in my group. And it's like every Friday, funny Friday, every Wednesday, shadow work Wednesday. Like I have this like theme going where that creates stability, that no matter what's going on in my personal life, I'm showing up in my business with the thing I'm craving, which was stability. So yeah, that's been super awesome.
That's interesting too, because like the triangulation can even be business as an entity.
Thanks. I'm still I don't care.
But I mean, no, I mean, that was just when you said that, I was like, oh, that's an aha. And that's something for me to be aware of, like right now, because I don't have a significant other with my kids. What?
Is it a bad thing though? I don't feel like it is. I feel like it's
no. I'm just saying, like, because like what I was thinking when you said that, I was like, oh, was it even like the distraction? Because what you wanted was stability in your business. And so your husband became the target, like a triangulation, like that's, and so realizing like, oh, I'm glad you said that, because I hadn't thought of it that way.
Yeah.
And
okay.
I don't, and I don't have a significant other yet, but if I get one, like that could very much happen, but I could still do it with my kids right now. Yeah. So it just, thank you. That was like, oh, I hadn't thought of that before.
Cool. Okay. And how about you, Eliza? Professionally, personally? I think you shared personally, but yeah, professionally?
Yeah. I mean, professionally, I don't know. I'm just with my business. Since I've been sick and everything has kind of been on the back burner, so I haven't really thought about. So I've been thinking about
honoring yourself, though. That's what it sounds like. Yeah,
exactly. And I took this in a much more I didn't really think about it business wise. That maybe next time I read through it, I'll have to think about that. But,
I like that.
Yeah, it was mostly personal stuff.
Okay,
came up.
Cool. All right, and let's see. Did you guys like Dr. Lerner's style of writing? I personally did.
I think she's super easy to read.
Yeah.
I liked it. I felt it was like lots of information, but in a conversational, like easy digestible format.
And I was telling Eliza before you came on, like, I really like that a lot of the chapters were in 20 pages. It was like, and so I was like, oh, I'll just read 20 pages. And then I'm like, oh, I completed a whole chapter. I don't know. It released dopamine for sure. I was like, oh, accomplishment, whole chapter done. And then when I got to chapter 7 and 8, I was like, what happened to my 20 pages, homie? Like, digging that. So then I was like, okay, I'll just break it down. So I liked it.
I like that she teaches through story too.
Yeah. Yeah.
versus just data, because it makes it so much more relatable.
It's less
at least for me.
dry. Yes,
Yeah.
as well. Yeah.
And it's also like I mean, maybe share a little too much. What was the first couple? Sandra and was it Larry? I was like, oh shit, were you in my house? I mean, it was like so rude. I was like, oh my god.
She's speaking to me.
So yeah. So I don't know. It's a style that works really well with the way I've learned.
So I
So
just
like
realized something when you said that, like the fly on the wall thing. I had that moment too because when I was a kid, my mom used to talk bad about me to my brother, and so that was the triangle. And then she would talk bad about me, no, about him to me. So he and I never could bond because we were built up to like hate each other essentially because she was like the focal. And I in reading this I was like, that was so unhealthy, and then I was like, am I doing that in my own, like with my kids, and I'm like, where am I doing that? And so I was able to take kind of an inventory of like, okay, I get to shift this here, because I don't talk bad about the kids, but I do find myself like, it's easier for me to take certain children's side because they're nicer.
or more, or going back to the knowing the history, that part,
you're not
I
just
was like,
as
oh,
aggressive.
that's helpful. Although I think it's funny because the son, I feel bad, when they say, like, I truly do not have a favorite child, but I have a child I relate to
Yeah.
more.
I
Is
have
that,
a couple
like,
children that bring out the better sides in me, and then like one that doesn't. And
I don't know. I have a child, the child that they would say, like James would say, that Luke, that I'm like, yeah, I don't know what it is. It's something I still have a spiritual contract to learn something that I've learned a lot, but not all the way.
Yeah.
Because I've said before, if my brother had passed away, I would literally swear on a stack of Bibles he was my brother reincarnated.
Mhm.
And Mike and I never got along.
Yeah.
And then he's also a spitting image of his dad. And
Yeah.
we know how that turned out.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm like, ooh, there's still the toxic, the over-functioning part of me takes
Mhm.
over
Yeah.
and still
Yeah.
wants to like fix him, save him, da da da. You know what I mean? And so I don't know. I
Yeah.
saw it
With the
really from
one
his
child,
words.
I have to rescind my statement, to be fair, because we've come a very long way. And she's the one I grow the most with because of the fact that like we're breaking a generational cycle that's been going on for like more than 4 generations back, where it's like the
Yeah.
oldest daughter with the mother. And so I'm
Mhm.
just like, okay, we get to do this, and she's aware of it, and we work on it together. And yeah, I don't know the last time I even had an argument with her. Like it's just been very able to have a conversation and be calm, which has been nice because we're both pretty conscious about it. So anyway, it's been nice. Anyway, you want to add anything, Eliza? Did you like her style?
Yeah, I really, like you said, I liked that she she did it through storytelling, but she didn't get lost in the storytelling. Like I've read some um books that, they're wonderful. They're much more story based. They're just different. But I appreciated that, like, it was really easy to see the point in all her stories. Like some of the other books that use storytelling, it kind of takes a while. It's like, okay, like where is this going? And
Yeah,
okay, there's the point. But hers, it's like, okay, I see what the point is and what she's trying to say with this. So
pretty
it
quickly.
was very easy to understand. Um, I enjoyed it a lot.
I'm
Yeah.
excited when Shelly, because Shelly recommended this book like 6 months ago.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I was like,
She
yes,
recommended
but I'm
it to
not
me a lot
sure,
too.
like, and that's why I was like, oh, timing's right. But when I first put it in my Amazon cart, the one that I actually was drawn to is The Dance of Intimacy. So
Mm.
I'm like, after reading this, I'm like, I do like her writing style. I want to get that book and
Yeah.
read that one
Yeah.
too.
I think it'll be good
So,
for sure.
yeah.
Okay, so if you could ask Dr. Lerner one thing, what would it be? I would ask her what to do in my situation. Like, what do we do about if you are faced with, well, she did say physical, but I think it applies to emotional and mental. I guess I would just ask, like, okay, if you can't directly heal, let's say with my mom in in a way that like we have a rekindled relationship, then what is your suggestion, type of thing. So yeah, that would be it for me. How about you guys?
I'm actually not sure right now.
Oh, okay.
For full disclosure, I read 80 pages today, so I ingested a
Oh.
lot of information today.
You're just like gunned it out. Nice.
Because I was like, I'm going to take a relaxing day. My kids are with their dad, and I had nothing planned. And then I was like, I'm just going to finish it. I need to cross it off my list.
Well done. Well done. No, it's good. It's okay.
Yeah.
If you come up with one, pop it in the event and just like, yeah. And how about you, Eliza?
I mean, yeah, probably just like, since I've swung on the pendulum from pursuer to distancer in my marriage, how do I get balanced without going back to being a pursuer, just like let it, create balance rather than swinging back to the other extreme, I guess, because that's what I'm worried about. I'm worried about, if I engage, it's gonna, I'm gonna go back into that role, which I don't want to do anymore because it's exhausting, and so
I think for
It
what
really-
I took away was like, as long as you're honoring you, that's the point. Because if you're not having that, I like to use the term self-love agreement versus boundary. It's like, because you're loving you enough to say, hey, I'm feeling this. And, I'd really like to experience this with you. Are you available for it? If he's not, then it's like, how do you get to basically like mother yourself, show up for you and love you? Yeah. So
I feel like
I like your question.
when I was reading this is my thought was it takes a very strong person to do this. She touched on that at the end and said, do it little steps, like one little thing at a time. Yeah. But I also found, I really do believe a lot of it gets into, well, just doing the like energy work, doing wounded inner child work, doing ancestral healing work. It all helps gain the strength to stand in your own authority. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the more you can stand in your own authority, the less likely that pendulum will keep swinging, because you'd be able to just like, this is what, does that make sense? Yeah. But it becomes like a which came first, the chicken or the egg, because you can approach it her way too. And then like little step. I don't know. I thought, ooh, this would be a great thing for tiny habits. Tiny habits for self-love or for shifting relationships. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. And were you going to add something, Eliza? You unmuted.
No, I was just agreeing with Angie.
Yeah. I like the quote, getting derailed is just part of the process. So be patient with yourself. It's a big deal. I was just going to bring in the tiny habits, because it's like, it's that small incremental day by day celebrate it, versus, okay, I had this lapse, but then you know what? I did really great here. I'm going to take that as a win, know? Like, yeah. So.
Well, and literally, I know, because Sabrina, have you started Tiny Habits yet? Or were you reading this one before? Okay. Eliza, have you read Tiny Habits? Or Jana? Because I won't go into all of it, but basically it's like how to make something really, really small. Like I'm going to do 2 push-ups, not 20, so that you'll actually do it consistently.
Yeah.
But in the book, he talks about pearl habits, which is like taking something that's an irritant and using it as an opportunity for something great. And that's like, in the book, he uses that example of this couple going through a contentious divorce. And then they're like, she made the decision, every time after he insults me, I will think of something I can do to love myself or something along those lines, and not do it, just think of something she could do and how it then she almost was like, she wasn't triggered by his insults. And I thought that in this, like, even just like to have the tiny habit, like, after I feel my chest tighten or after I feel anger, I will take 3 deep breaths, or, like something that will help that pause happen.
Yeah,
Do you know what I
exactly.
mean?
Yeah, mine is grab some water. Grab water
Oh,
and take a drink of water.
yeah.
And actually,
So
that
if you're
came from my
so if
dog.
you're talking with your husband and you're like this,
I'm just gonna drink some water now. No, but that actually came ironically from my 13-year-old daughter who was having a meltdown today. And I was last month when I was having my come apart and losing it, she knocked on the door and she had a cup of water and she said, "Drink some water, Mom." And I was just like, oh, and I started bawling. I drank some water and it like completely brought me out of my trauma trigger, really is what was going on. And so today when she had her moment, I gave her a glass of water. I said, "Have some water, sweetheart." And she like immediately was able to calm down. So that's my thing, is like grab water. It gets more oxygen to the brain.
My mom, when I was little, and I really struggled emotionally regulating when I was little. So whenever I was just like in meltdown mode and there was nothing that like my parents could do to, get me out of it, my mom would have me drink water. And
It gets oxygen to the brain. It works, and it gets it to the
Yeah.
cells, because when you're losing it and your cortisol is being released as big as it is, your cells are literally dehydrating and going into freeze, flight, or fight mode. And so drinking that water just like hydrates it, it calms it down. It's like, it's amazing what water does. It really is. So
I
yeah,
I have a trauma response to that, so that's why I don't do that.
that's funny.
You saw when Sabrina what I looked like when I started hyperventilating. The last time I had gotten to that point,
Yeah, yeah.
Sabrina and I were at lunch and I got highly triggered and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm 12 years old again." That was the last time I had gotten to the point where I was like, well, that's not true, but the last time I really remember being so mad that I was hyperventilating. My 6th grade teacher shoved water in front of my face and was like, "Here, drink some water." And she was the one who triggered me, who had like wronged me. And I remember in 6th grade thinking, "Are you dumb as rocks? If I drink that, I'll choke on it because I can't control when I'm breathing in."
Right.
And so I didn't respond because I was like hyperventilating and I couldn't say anything. And she goes, "Drink some water," and shoved it in my face again. And I remember thinking, "Dumbass, I'm gonna choke." But I like, "Fine, I'll prove to you," and I took a drink and totally choked. And she goes, "Well, not when you're breathing in."
And why this is funny is the fact that I triggered that memory, and I'm the one carrying the water symbol going, "Drink water." Oh my gosh, I love this so much. It came full circle, Angie.
I know. But now I can like, wait a second, I can take that power back from
You
Miss
can.
Moran.
Yes, you can. You do have the power.
I drink water because I choose to.
I choose to hydrate my cells. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. So I wanted to say before we wrap up or anything, I think the other question is like, what was your biggest takeaway? So this is on page 89, and she's talking about the I message, non-blaming statement. And it's when Matthew has the knife and the mom's like said over and over, put the knife down. And he's like, "No, I'm not going to do it," being defiant. And she just was like, "I feel scared. I'm worried that you're going to cut yourself." And she said it so calmly. And he's like, "Well, that's your problem," right? Still defiant. And she goes, "You're absolutely right. It is my problem that I'm scared. And I'm going to take care of my problem right now by taking that knife away from you." That was like groundbreaking for me, because even down to Dustin not dancing, it's like, okay, that is my problem. Him not wanting to dance isn't his problem. He honored himself. It's my problem. So what do I get to do? I'm going to create opportunities for me to go out and dance, and he can join or not, but I'm not going to be attached to like forcing somebody else to be different or blaming or whatever. So yeah. Anyway, how about you ladies? What was your biggest aha before we wrap up for the night?
so mine
go ahead.
was, let me pull up the quote here.
Okay.
the quote that said, "Children are the carriers of whatever has been left unresolved from the generations that went before."
I highlighted that too.
I was listening to it, I was like, oof, like that just hit me so hard. Especially because like I had just done an exchange with Becky and for light language, and a bunch of stuff came up of like all the women in your family, like were basically like so overgiving that they never honored themselves, and that's what you're expected to be like in your family, kind of thing. And just like me navigating that and just like it just, all the synchronicities and all the stuff was just like lining up so perfectly. And then it was just like one of those things that was like, I know I'm not going to be a perfect mom, but I want to end the cycles for my daughter, especially because I'm having a girl. And it's like I don't want to I don't want to keep passing these curses that have been in the female line of my family on, and yeah.
Did you say you're having a girl? Are you pregnant?
Yeah.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah. It's been it's been a very rough pregnancy, but we're excited.
Yeah.
I have my takeaway from the book, but I also want to say I had a major takeaway just this past week on clearing patterns, because I realized that my perfectionism was taking over. That I had this like, I have to clear all the patterns for my children.
Yeah.
And
I'm not doing all.
And actually, it really was just in the last day or two that I was talking to someone about how I know to the core of my being that my dad took that on as a spiritual contract, being the pattern breaker for his generation, and that I am for my generation, and I can see how far my dad got, and then all of a sudden I was like, oh, he passed the baton to me, and I'm supposed to pass the baton to my kids.
Right.
Like, it's not, and I was like, I was totally letting my perfectionism, like, I'm not supposed to clean the whole whiteboard.
Exactly. And okay, so Shelley actually shared this analogy of there was this story that this boy or man had some sort of vision. I'm probably going to botch a lot of this, so I'm just going to do the best I can. But essentially, like, they met on the other side, or the spirit realm, and the dad had this porcelain mask on. And he took it off, and I'm getting chills. And as he took it off, he was just bawling. This dad's bawling to his son. And he said, and he threw it to the ground, and it smashed. And he said, I had to wear this for you to be able to, like, I made the soul contract to be this mask for you in your lifetime, so you could live your experience the way you were meant to, so he could go through the trials, etc. And now that this mask is gone, you can really see me. I've been there, even though it was a rough role that I played. It was the role that was required in order for you to become who you became. Like, I don't know. It was really deep. I got chills, so I may have said it right. I don't know. But if I didn't,
that's conveyed the right idea. It's also that, like, remembering that every person we encounter is a pure spirit of love.
Yeah. Exactly.
Even if they're treating us like jerks, it's because they made a spiritual contract with us out of love.
Yeah. So what's your takeaway?
My takeaway was actually when she was talking about the triangles, and sorry, just a second. Oh, Miles. Okay. And she said, sorry, the neighbor got home. He can hear the garage door go up. One of the children may become a major focus for concern, perhaps through the development of an emotional or behavioral problem, thus drawing, she was talking about Judy, thus drawing Judy's attention away from her own dissatisfaction in the marriage. And that is 100%. And I even at times was somewhat aware of that with my kids. Because they were literally sensitive to the world. I mean, we were on like crazy restricted diet, doing all this stuff. And I even had moments of awareness of that when I was in the middle of it, almost like spirit telling me, you're creating this to an extent. Like, it's not Munchausen's, like, it's not because it's real what they're experiencing, but it's because like things were so bad in my marriage, I needed a project to distract me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a huge awareness. Wow.
Which is exactly why when I started doing my own spiritual and energy healing and setting boundaries, like all of a sudden my kids could start eating gluten and could start eating, like, not that it's great for them, but could handle food dyes, and could all of a sudden, like, all these foods we had to eliminate for them no longer made them break out.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
That's a huge,
So,
a big aha.
yeah, but I was like also then in the mind of like, oh, and I better be careful because I guess I'm a damn powerful manifester.
Yes, you are. Yes, we all are. We really
Not
are.
to say, I mean, obviously it was also the toxicity of the relationship. Like, I see it as they were in constant fight or flight because because there was so much tension, because we weren't addressing what was actually going on. We were using them as an excuse. Does that make sense?
Self-awareness. Yeah. Wow. Very cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you, ladies, so much for reading the book alongside and together, and utilizing the event to like just kind of drop in and be like, oh my gosh, this was my takeaway. Because I enjoyed reading those. I was like, yeah, I agree. And then even being here tonight. So we have the opportunity. I've set up the next 3. So the second half of November, if you're feeling up for it, I think it's a great habit to be in, to read 13 to 16 pages a day. And so if you want, we're going to read Tiny Habits and have a discussion group on December 5th. I know there's another date. Me personally, I'm going to have it done by then. That's my goal, but I want to offer it in this community as well, where we join in for that. So that's like 3 weeks. And then for the December discussion, it's the gaslight effect. I don't know. It's really good.
I've never heard of that one.
Yeah. So it is how to spot and survive the hidden manipulation others use to control your life. So basically, stop letting other people get inside your head, tell you what to think, shake your judgment, sabotage your self-esteem. It's a really empowering book. So that'll be done through December. The discussion will happen January 2nd. And then I'll have another one. So I'll send you guys the invite. But I just realized in this discussion with what Eliza said, she's like, I want to reread it. I'm thinking for February's discussion is going to be Dance of Anger again. And maybe just, we be at a different place. It's a brand new year and there's other people, and I'm going to have it run through the whole month rather than just like the 2-week sprint, which I loved because it was like, I really value having deadlines that I'm like, yeah, okay, that challenges me just enough that I'm driven and motivated. But yeah, so that'll give us a month to kind of just breeze through that. But I've started Tiny Habits and it really is cool. I'm like already loving the one thing that was like, the moment your feet hit the ground, I will have a great day. Like, it's so simple.
You would love BJ, by the way. So Eliza and Jana, I am a Tiny Habits certified coach. And cool. So there's like bi-monthly trainings with BJ, and I've been in like breakout discussions with him. So he is like one of the most positive people I've ever met. He just loves to learn and he loves to make people feel better. Or like not make people, but like he loves to inspire people to feel better. Yeah. Cool. I would say this discussion was in Taylor's group. If Eliza and Jana, if you're going to read that book, I do recommend the hard copy.
Yeah, I actually wrote that as well. I wrote, get the hard copy. It's very visual.
Yeah, if you get the audio, it does come with PDF print off ability, like files, and I would highly recommend printing them. But it is a little bit more like a super easy to read textbook in a way.
It is.
Like, it's very technical. And so, and there's a lot of graphs.
Yeah.
So if you're okay visualizing when someone says, well, on the X axis and on the Y axis, but if you need the pictures and stuff, the hard copy is a lot better.
Fully recommend the same thing. I have the physical copy myself because I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, I need
in full disclosure, I have both, but I read it first, hard copy, and then I went through certification training and all of that, and and then recently I just listened to the Audible because I've already read it. Like if I wouldn't have been able to learn from the Audible straight up. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because I was just reviewing the information. I listened to it, and I listened to it at 2.5 speed.
That's awesome. Yeah. Alrighty. Well, thank you so much, ladies. Is there anything else you want to add before we jump off? Really appreciate spending the evening with you and chatting about the book, Dance Finger.
Thank you, Sabrina. This was awesome.
Okay. I'll see you on the next book club meeting. See ya. Have a good night, ladies. Bye.
Bye.